to stats class, probability and stats, I should say. Here goes our first lesson, learning to count. This should not be too stressful for you. And here's the big idea. Let's zoom into this idea. As we begin to talk about probabilities, one of the first things that we need to establish is counts. How many things are there of something in particular? So when you think of a count, here we need to think about the possible counts in the bottom, the total possible counts, and in the upstairs or the numerator, here's what we are looking for. So we typically call these the desired counts, or maybe we call these actually events. Okay? So we need to find strategies for doing counts efficiently and accurately. First of all, some vocabulary terms that we use that you may or may not be familiar with. First of all, there is outcomes. These are events, or they're what we want to happen. What are possible. Didn't spell that right, did I? B, Mr. Larson. Possible. What are possible outcomes or events? The sample space is all possible events. All right. And finally, a tree diagram. This is a way to draw all the events. All right, with the vocab out of the way, let's go through some examples. I think there are about 7 of them. And the idea is that you've got about 14 homework problems, and this should help you kind of match up those problems and do them effectively and accurately. First one, a simple coin toss. What are the outcomes in a coin toss? Well, you could get a heads, or you could not get a heads, and we typically call that heads and tails. And we typically maybe do a shorthand of that with an H and a T. Now, some people would argue that you could land on edge, but the likelihood of that is so infinitely small that we can discontinue that or discount that as a possibility. All right? So, heads or tails. I'll post a video of somebody who attempted to demonstrate that you could get a tails, and maybe you can actually see the flaw in their video. Example 2. Find the outcomes for a teacher taking attendance. Here now, there's not just 2. There's at least 3, and you could probably, if you wanted to get picky, even go to a larger sense. But you could be present. And again, we might abbreviate that with a P. You might be absent with an A. And you also could be present but tardy as well. And again, there's different reasons for absences, excused, unexcused, that kind of thing. So, but basically those are the 3 different outcomes for a teacher taking attendance. And I'll be really clear with the examples and the questions on the assignments and the homework and the quizzes as to what I'm looking for. Example 3, find the sample space. Okay, so this is now to find all ways that we can get a sum of rolling 2 die. Really important that you highlight the words, because if you were to misread that and skip the word sum, you might have a completely different answer. To do this, it's probably best to make a list, or you could even make a grid. So let's go with a grid. Some people call this a T-chart. And so going across the top, we'll have our 6 sides of a die listed with numbers 1 through 6, and then coming down, we will also have our 6 sides of a die. And this is going to help us so we can list the sums, because we don't want to list it as a 1, 1, again, because of the word sum. Instead, we want to say, oh, 2 is an option, because 1 plus 1 is 2. And so is 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1 plus 6 is 7. Yeah? So this is a fairly obvious chart to fill out, but it's going to show us what are the possible sums. 4, 5, we can go this way too. And you can start to see a pattern develop, and that's okay. That's actually good. It shows us different 7, 8, 9, 8, 9, 10. All right, and so now we can see that our sums, the sample space, goes from 2, and I'm going to draw my answer out as a list. 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to put dot, dot, dot all the way up to 12. All right. It's important that we have also some sort of diagram or some sort of list, which is going to help us back up your answer. I'm going to need to see your thinking, as it were. All right. Example 4. Anitra, Brandy, Cody are applying at Menards. What is the sample space for the manager to arrange their interviews? So they're going to call them in for a fabulous job at the place where you can save money. And so to make this list, instead of writing out their full names, let's use an abbreviation. And without any harm, hopefully they're not offended by being called A, B, and C. So the manager could call them in to that order, A, B, and C. But they could say, well, A goes first, C will go second, and B will go third. Or we could start with Brandy and then put the other 2 in either order. And notice how I am making a list, and it's an organized list. It's not just a random, like throwing down 3 letters and then another 3 letters, but I want to make sure that I have covered all the possibilities. So the sample space is this. We could put commas between them, kind of box that in. All right. Now example 5 is where it kind of gets dangerous, because here the question says, at Barfy's Breakfast Barn, you have these different options for breakfast. Sorry, it's kind of a limited place. How many orders are possible? So that's a numeric answer because it says how many. If you were to give me just an answer, that would be either all right or all wrong. If you were to make a list and you miss something on the list, then depending upon how organized your work is, you would then either get some sort of partial credit for having missed something. To do this one, I think we're going to make what might be useful is what we call a tree. All right. So remember, one of the terminologies that we're talking about here is tree diagrams. So a way to draw out all those. And so the tree would start with, I'm going to pick an option that only has 2 choices. So the milk or the OJ. You could start also with the side if you want the toast or the croissant. All right. So option number 1, our first choice is going to be milk. Actually, let's put the milk here, and then let's put the OJ here. Now from the milk, you could have 3 choices. Again, I'm not going to use the full words, just the letters S for scrambled, F for fried, P for poached. And again, for the OJ, you would also have S, F, P as well. And then finally, you get to pick a toast or a croissant. A toast or a croissant. A toast or a croissant. All right. Now, when we're done, it is a little tricky to count these up because be careful what you count. If I look at this option here, that is one choice. I could have picked the milk, scrambled eggs, and toast. Okay? Or I could have picked milk, scrambled eggs, and croissant. So each one of these here on the very end are my choices. And you can't, careful, don't skip any of them. So in this case, we see that there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So my sample space is 12 orders. Okay. Good example in today's digital world is creating passwords. This password is kind of a silly password because we're only using A, B, C, and D. So what are the possible passwords for this one? Not how many, but we need to actually list them out. So much like that interview process, except this time it's 4 letters. So A, B, I'm going to start with those two, and then I'm going to flip D and C around. Now there's no more that start with A and B. So now I'm going to keep A, and I'm going to go with A, C. And then I'll take the BD and flip the DB around. Okay. And finally, you could go with AD. So these are all the ones that begin with A, and then the 3 choices. Now we're going to get techniques that are going to find us shortcuts for this, but it's always good to have a backup technique. Now I could do this same list again. This time though, instead of starting with A's, we could start with B's. And again, it looks like this list of A's has 6. So B's, I will also have 6. And C's, I will have another 6. And then I could start off with D's again and also have 6. So the possible passwords in this case, we've shown the first list and the other 6 would follow. We could even maybe add 4 little spaces so that the person could see you just follow the same pattern. Yes? All right. So we see that there's 24. Finally, here we have a diagram and asking us to interpret the tree diagram. So in this case, we want to use vocabulary. And there's about 3 different statements we could make, possibly more. All right. First of all, we can see that there are 2 outcomes. Outcomes, and it's either heads or tails. We're going to assume that's what the H and the T stand for. Okay. There are a total of 8 in the sample space. And we can see those 8 right here. Yes? Finally, the other thing that we notice is that there are 3 events, or there are 3 coins, possibly, or 3 tosses to that event. Yes? And we can see the first toss here, we can see the second toss here, and we can see the third toss here. All right. So important for you to be able to write out. And finally, methods. There are 3 methods that we have talked about in doing these problems: making organized lists, Yes. Drawing tree diagrams to show those lists. And finally, using grids to also keep track of the sample space. Well, hopefully this helps you do your assignment, which is 1-1 sample space. Find it in Schoology. Do your work on a piece of paper and then take a picture and upload it. And the deadline is Thursday. You'll see that. Thursday, 10 p.m. to get this all submitted. All right, we'll be doing some of those problems together in class so that you can feel comfortable